never been to Roosevelt Island right here off the George Washington Parkway, hopefully by the time we're done, you'll have a reason to come and visit. Truly extraordinary history can be found right here on Theodore Roosevelt Island. On January 1st, 1863, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, it freed enslaved persons all throughout the Confederate States. In fact, anywhere where people were held as slaves, they were then free. The District of Columbia was, at that point in the South, had enslaved persons as well, as did Maryland, as did Virginia. Well, the population began to absolutely explode. You had persons who were born free, but you also had persons who were enslaved from all around the area, and they began to descend on the nation's capital. It was quickly overwhelmed the infrastructure because, in fact, these were refugees. They didn't have a place to live, they didn't have anywhere to go. They just knew that they were free. There were two white army chaplains who began to petition President Lincoln with the idea of forming a regiment of colored troops. Eventually, he agreed, and the 1st District of Columbia Colored Volunteers was formed as a regiment. Remember, Washington, D.C. was still the South, and these newly freed, formerly enslaved persons were now forming a regiment to serve in the military, were not well received by the general population. There were riots, they were met with racism, bigotry, and all manner of things. It got so bad that it was decided that we needed a place where the 1st District of Columbia Colored Volunteers could live and train and be safe. And that's why we're here on Roosevelt Island, because this is that place. Back then, it wasn't Roosevelt Island, it was Mason Island. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. So the infrastructure of Washington, D.C. is overwhelmed very quickly with these formerly enslaved persons descending on the nation's capital. And remember, Washington, D.C. wasn't then what it was now. I mean, you had downtown, which was not downtown as we know it. There was no Shaw neighborhood. There was no LaDroit neighborhood, uptown. None of that was there. It was all country. You had Arlington and Arlington Estate, which we'll talk a little bit about. But Washington, D.C. was a very small place, so the infrastructure was quickly overwhelmed when all of these formerly enslaved persons descended on the nation's capital. So they formed the 1st District of Columbia Colored Volunteers, and they began to train here on Roosevelt Island, which was then Mason Island. This island, 88 acres, it was owned by the Mason family. In fact, they built an estate here. It was like their summertime getaway. When you come out here today, you'll see it's almost completely wooded over, but it wasn't like that then because they cultivated it, they farmed it. Again, you had the first District of Columbia Colored Volunteers training here, and by June of 1963, there were 10 regiments here. So the recruiting efforts swelled the ranks of the 1st District of Columbia Colored Volunteers. Their designation was changed, and they were mustered into service with the Union Army as the 1st United States Colored Troops. So they went from being a state militia to being a federal regiment of troops. The 54th Massachusetts that you may have heard of, the 55th Massachusetts that you may have heard of, the 28th Indiana, and others, a lot of those were state militias that joined in with the Union Army during the Civil War. But these men, these African Americans, were mustered into federal service as the 1st United States Colored Troops. They were part and parcel of the Union Army. And by the summertime, they were ready. They were ready for combat. So a little bit more about Mason Island. Mason Island is 88 acres. It is now known as Theodore Roosevelt Island. It sits between Virginia and the District of Columbia. And if you've ever driven down the George Washington Parkway, you've no doubt seen it. It'll be on your right-hand side. If you've never been here, it's certainly worth taking a half a day to come and explore. There's ample parking right on site. You can also get here via the bike path, so you could park your car somewhere else downtown even, have a nice leisurely ride over here to Roosevelt Island, and then you can explore the island. Come on. So you can come out to Roosevelt Island, you can explore the island. It's 88 acres, like I said. There's walking trails. There's no bikes allowed, so you won't have to worry about being run over. I would encourage you to do it if you have not. This is one place where you know for a fact that as you walk around, you're walking in the footsteps of your ancestors, for there were many of them here. But there were not only soldiers here. So I told you about Arlington Estate, which is over essentially Arlington Cemetery now. There was a place called Freeman's Village, and it swelled also with the Emancipation Proclamation. Freeman's Village was seen as a prime location to establish a community of free African Americans after emancipation so that they could build the community and begin to live as free persons. I'm over here on Columbia Pike in Arlington, Virginia. This used to be known as Freeman's Village. In 1862, when Congress passed a law freeing enslaved persons in Washington, D.C., enslaved persons from Virginia, Maryland, all over flooded Washington, D.C., looking for a place to live, looking for work and such. There was so many people that it quickly overwhelmed the infrastructure that was Washington, D.C. at the time. The Arlington Estate, which is what Freeman's Village used to be called, was housing the Union Army during the Civil War. No longer needed for that purpose, it quickly became a viable option for these free enslaved persons who now needed a place to live. So it quickly became known as Freedman's Village. I have a personal connection to Freedman's Village because not far from here, just a few blocks away, is the venerated Mount Olive Baptist Church of Arlington, Virginia, which is where I came to Christ. So I know this neighborhood quite well because I spent many years here serving in ministry at Mount Olive Baptist Church in one degree or another. Not as a minister, but in the singles ministry and such. So Freedman's Village has a connection to Roosevelt Island, which is where the 1st District of Columbia Regiment was drilling and getting ready to serve in the Union Army. But so many people showed up that it quickly overwhelmed the location and the infrastructure as well. So some of those persons were also relocated here to what was then Mason Island. So you had the 1st District of Columbia, United States colored troops training and getting ready to go into battle. And you had refugees from Freeman's Village, which is over near Arlington Cemetery, here on what was then Mason Island. The Mason family built an estate here. They lived here and came here in the summertime as kind of a retreat, I guess. There used to be a ferry that ran from Mason Island over to Georgetown. And now it is connected via a pedestrian bridge from the Virginia side of the George Washington Parkway. Theodore Roosevelt was a conservationist and quite the outdoorsman, if you're not aware. And so the foundation that's in honor of his presidency and whatnot, they got together and they purchased Mason Island and renamed it Theodore Roosevelt Island in honor of his conservationist efforts. Um, Not just here, but all across America, he wanted to ensure that these wonderful outdoor places, these wonderful, beautiful spaces that America has, would be preserved for future generations and not bulldozed and developed, like a lot of places are. In fact, there's a story that goes, the first time he saw the Grand Canyon, he was so enamored by what he saw that he made efforts to ensure that every Boy Scout in America could make it to the Grand Canyon and see the Grand Canyon. So that's how much he was in love with nature. And that's why this is named Roosevelt Island. So I would encourage you to come out, take a quarter of a day, half a day. You can walk around these trails. You can experience the nature that is here. Summer, winter, spring, fall. It's a different landscape. It's a different picture, but it's beautiful in any season. So back to the United States colored troops. These men mustered into federal service as the first United States colored troops. They were the first officially sanctioned federal troops to serve in the Union Army as African Americans. They were the first, or the first federalized anyway. Okay. They served in the Battle of Petersburg. The Battle of Petersburg, now they mustered into service around 1863, is now 1864, and the Union Army is pressing towards Richmond. Richmond, mind you, is the capital of the Confederacy. Richmond is where Jefferson Davis and his cabinet is. Let me just do a little quick history rewind. Listen, because I think we forget. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, South Carolina immediately seceded from the Union, followed by Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and maybe missing a few others. They formed their own country. They elected their own president. They printed their own money. And in every secession document that you see, they state the reason is because of slavery. They want to protect their investment. They want to continue to reap benefits of all of this 400 years worth of free labor that they had. And most of them say specifically that the Negro is not equal to the white man. Now, all of this talk about states' rights, I think, is ridiculous. In fact, the vice president of the Confederacy said, we hold this foundational truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man. That's in the paperwork for the secession of these states who formed their own country apart from what was then the United States of America. States' rights is a theory, and nobody leaves home and health and hearth and warmth and family and safety and security for abstract theories of government. Okay, so the capital of the Confederacy is Richmond, Virginia, just like the capital of the Union is Washington, D.C. The president of the Union is Abraham Lincoln. The president of the Confederacy is Jefferson Davis. And the Union Army starts to press its way towards Richmond. The plan is to surround Richmond, or to go around it, and to lay siege to Petersburg. All of the supplies coming to Richmond were coming in through Petersburg. There were 4 or 5 different rail lines coming into Petersburg. Petersburg is not that far from Richmond. United States colored troops, the first United States colored troops, were pressed into service in that battle, and they served valiantly. There is a memorial in Petersburg. I'll show you a picture of it, that is dedicated to their service, their valor under fire, and everything that they did. I believe that because the ranks of the Union Army swelled so large with the inclusion of African American troops, that was the tipping point of what began to turn the tide of the Civil War. So they're laying siege to Petersburg. They were never actually able to completely surround it. That's what siege means. If you cut off your enemy's supplies completely, his war is over. And now it's just a matter of time. But they were able to do enough such that General Lee communicated to President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, you and your cabinet need to leave Richmond. It is no longer safe for you to be there. The Union Army is advancing. And that's what they did. They left Richmond via train. And eventually, Richmond fell. And we talked about that in the story of Garland White, who was in the 28th Indiana Infantry from Ohio. He was a chaplain. Richmond fell, and the Confederacy fell. And then we know that General Lee surrendered eventually to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, which is not far from Richmond as well. But the point is, these African American troops that swelled the ranks of the Union Army, beginning here at at least in the district at Roosevelt Island, helped in that effort and tipped the tide and turned the tide of the Civil War. They are heroes, and they are deserving of all due honors that could be afforded them. So here on Roosevelt Island, right here in the District of Columbia, you can walk these trails and know that you're walking amongst the footsteps. Imagine the soldiers drilling left, right, left. Imagine them taking up fire positions. Imagine them doing everything they needed to do to be ready to serve in the battle, which they served in quite valiantly. We know that the Civil War came to an end right around 1865. So in the space of 2 short years, they came into service. They learned what they needed to do. They marched off to a fate unknown. Many of them died. So we, I think, should never cease to remember the service that they gave in spite of overwhelming odds. The nation that they served, which in many ways did not serve them. The battles that they fought so that we could experience the liberties that we now have. So to the first United States colored troop and to all of the African Americans who served in the ranks of the Civil War, we say thank you for your service. May God bless and keep your memory, and may you rest in peace. Truth be told, my brothers and sisters, you can find our history anywhere because African American history is everywhere. Come on out to Roosevelt Island and walk amongst the trees where your ancestors once walked. See you again real soon.
If you would like to see more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification icon to receive our new releases. If you would like to assist Truth Be Told in our mission to preserve African American history, which is American history, please share this video with your children, family, and friends. Truth Be Told, you can find Black history anywhere because our history is everywhere.